Iowa. They're, oh, there we go. Yeah. And they're currently working on a book about Black people and comics. So we're so lucky to have Gyasi here today. So whenever Gyasi wants to get started, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. You all are great. I'm really excited to be here. The pleasure is all mine. I am I'm gonna talk for like 20-ish minutes. I'm gonna read some of my work and then sort of share some of the ideas that we're gonna be sort of talking through. We're gonna have like, depending on how people are feeling, 10, 15, 20 minutes of like discussion and questions and conversation afterwards. I have a prompt for us to write to. So we'll be about 20 minutes of writing, and then we're going to come back and share and do some more conversing about the process and sort of what
Um,
we're thinking about
can
during
I call
this
you in 45 minutes?
time together. Um, I also want to state something. I'm going to queue up,
Okay,
share
my
my
legal writing class is
screen.
starting right now.
Let me
It
do
just showed up on my
this.
thing and reminded me. I don't know
Oh,
what people do without reminders. That's all I have to say.
okay. Um, as a reminder, mute your
Okay.
videos while other people are talking. If you want to use the chat, I'm very much about that. If you have errant thoughts or questions or something as I'm sort of doing my spiel, please use the chat. Talk to one another. I'm a big discussion person. This is supposed to be like a collaborative thing, so I really encourage that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I'm gonna read and then I have a PowerPoint and we'll get to that. Um, so just yeah, I guess an introduction to my work. This is a an essay that's like two poems in the same piece. I love nail polish. What I really want, I suppose, are choices. I envy a nice mature green, some pinks and purples, and maybe an orange or two for all my many moods, all the times I sit stressed on the spaceship of my unmade bed, or all the times the cat, who belongs not to me but to the alley, rubs its eager face against my thumb, or all the times I laugh, plus all the times I don't, never mind the reason for either. Silence or a kind of crusted over explosion, away with all that. I think it's because the nibs of color stretch my body out to a point that I care so much about spillage, about precision, about making the sloppy labor of the left hand less sloppy. When I say point, I guess I really mean perspective, something concrete, like an artist or the horizon, tangible and tippy top, not that third eye crap they keep insisting is the real deal. When I say sloppy, I guess I really mean excessive, something beyond me that can dry into dots and smears, waxy acetate skin I can peel off my own. It's about expression or whatever is supposed to make you feel like you and not the you that you are trying to be for the people who are not you. The university sends an email offering me the chance to win 20 bucks if I tell them how I feel about my pronouns, but what they don't know is that this is a monologue. I paint myself fresh ends. I chew them off just to paint them over again. I never leave the house. I hate nail polish. Unfortunately, I'm grown. The butterfly I found perched on a blade of grass in my neighbor's yard turned out to be the sun-dried skin of a cupcake, a sweet and discarded parachute. The homie asked to see what exactly it is I've done to myself. I tell her there is bad news, but there is also good news. Somehow I've made it this far with only two colors, but I no longer think of cops whenever I see blue and red laced together. Instead, I think of the tradition I've managed to carve out of these last few days, the glorious asses of superheroes flying across the pages I read over half a blueberry bagel with what is probably too much cream cheese. I try for longer than I care to admit to take a picture of both hands with nothing but my sternum, the space in front of my neck, and the army of chins I've had since I was a kid. I settle for a pair of pics, two hands clawed in instead of fanned out. Bright cotton candy spit drooled across one, a light and shimmering almost blood on the other. I'm pretty enough for 3 exclamation points. The air outside is so humid it smells like silly putty. I sit on the back porch and I've always been sweating. The homie is drafting something, asks what kind of metaphor she can use for the doubling of a city and its blueprints, the tunnels underneath the streets. Echoes and mirrors and twins, all with an eye toward the performative, the tactile, a replica that is different, a shadow shifting with the context of the sun. I never know how to talk about these things. I turn my palms up toward the sky. I watch my nails creep past the tips of my fingers, the start of a sunrise, 10 tiny painted crowns chipping. Thank you. Yeah, so hopefully that gives you just a little bit of an idea of the kind of stuff that I'm interested in, kind of poetry, kind of essay, kind of grounded, kind of not. Lots of questions about sort of definitions and stuff. I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out Zoom. Yeah, I'm always a big fan of cameras on, but I also know that like people have like lives and stuff, so if you are otherwise occupied, don't feel too bad about it. Yeah, so I think before I begin, I just also want to say, or I guess as I continue beginning, I'm somebody who really thinks about writing in terms of process, in terms of living, in terms of what it means to sort of approach the work, the sort of emotional work, as often as you can, right? And so for me, something that I've learned is that I do love craft talk, and I do love like nitty gritty word punctuation, like stuff like that. But I think it's also important to think about ideas and how you're thinking about yourself as an artist, yourself as like a person living in the world, how you approach your own self and your own sort of abilities. And so a lot of what I'm going to be talking about here is more kind of heady. It's ideas. There will be some craft stuff, but I hope that that's not too out there, and hopefully this can generate more specific conversations sort of as we go. I'm gonna start with if this will go, there we go. I'm gonna start giving us the prompt that we are gonna be writing toward later on in this workshop, just so you can sort of think about it as we're talking. I will want us eventually to tell a story from your real life in whatever genre form you want that is starring a heightened, fictionalized, stylized, exaggerated version of yourself, right? That's not you as you exist in the real world, but is sort of more so, less than, more angry, more anxious, something that is sort of played up for the page. So the first the bears are just so we have something cute to look at while I ramble. The first thing is that you can't, as a human being, right? You can't ever really translate yourself onto the page, right? This is a conversation about persona and about how you approach that stuff on the page. It's cliche, it's existential, but it's true, right? You are a singular human being that has experienced all of these things that might be similar or like demographically the same as other people, but you are the only you that will ever exist, right? There's all these hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of individual choices that like family and friends have made, people in your past, your ancestors, the sweep of time to make the valley where people are settled to become the place where you were born, and to dictate what like things that people there believed in, and all of this, right? You are this product of this accumulated sort of existential lineage, right? And beyond that, right, language as a mode of communication, right, is kind of always metaphor, right? I'm making a series of guttural noises that my mouth is shaping to be words that we've agreed mean things, and I'm trying to use the words that I can say to communicate a thought to you, right? There's all these layers of distance. We don't really think about it in that way because it's an effective system, right? Language is beautiful, of course, and it can communicate really great ideas, but there's always going to be a gap. Another way I like thinking about it is like, your favorite character, right? Someone who you love and cherish, who's fictional, is like, no matter how deep and nuanced and real that they feel in the experience of reading about them, they are a fraction of a fraction of even the most like mundane, boring person that you could meet in reality, right? Because they don't have the sort of weight of all that history that I just talked about. They kind of do because you're creating them, right? But they aren't like a real human being, right? And so this is like the inherent problem with like communicating with people as a person, right? And so that gap is sort of scary because it means that like in some ways no one will ever really know um the full you, right? Can you ever know the full you, right? I'm a very anxious person. I like overthink a lot. So like this is very much something I'm just like meditating on throughout my day. But it's also freeing because if communicating objective reality and all of the nuance that comes with that is not possible fully, and again, we're talking like creative work because obviously like journalism and there's some layers there, but in terms of your own personal experience, that it's not possible to fully communicate it. So what other truths can you reach by embracing a version of yourself on the page that isn't 100% accurate to who you are in real life, right? Maybe this version of you is more anxious or more snarky or kinder, or actually did say that that comeback that you thought of in the shower hours later, right? Like there's manipulation that you can do because the other factor of all of this is that somebody is then going to read this who doesn't know you at all, at least hopefully, right? This is going to be read by someone who has no knowledge of you beyond this work. And so you can sort of um, choose to explore emotional truths rather than like accuracy, right? And I think to head off the question about lying, I think if you are exaggerating and manipulating things in a way that is getting more toward truth and more toward the emotional, like this is how it felt to experience this, and you're letting a reader in on that experience, right? Then it isn't really lying, right? Because you're not trying to manipulate someone into thinking something that isn't true, right? You're actually trying to coax them closer, right? So that's a big idea to think about. The other thing is that like the telling of a story is part of the story, right? Even if something crazy happens and then like you immediately like text the like group chat and you're like, oh my God, this guy did this crazy thing, or I just saw something wild at the grocery store. You are deciding, right? And the next time a homie tells you a story, right? You can think like, okay, what like dramatic choices are they making? What emphasis are they putting at different places? What information are they withholding so that they can say it later? And then you're like, oh wow, like she really was tripping. Like that kind of narrative building happens just in regular life. And so, there were some people who asked in about like tips for like narrative poetry and creative nonfiction in terms of like what moments are worth examining and writing about, right? And the answer, right, is like all of them, right? Any moment can be made meaningful because every moment is in a way meaningful, right? It's all about what the story is that you're trying to tell, right? How you're trying to like what it is that you're trying to communicate, and then how that thing is being framed. An example that I was thinking of when I was writing this thing is like, let's say you're at like a party and you see somebody who you have like this complicated history with dancing, and they're clearly like just uninhibited, having like a good time, right? And there's that emotion, that feeling of watching them do that, and you want to communicate that. You could outline the whole relationship, right? And then have it end with that moment. You could start with the moment and then you could outline everything later. You could scramble time so that we're seeing events sort of as they happen, like via like emotional, like what's most important emotionally, right? Or you could focus, just on the moment of watching this happen, right? In the piece that I just read, obviously it's like me painting my nails. There's a lot of stuff that's layered onto it, but for the most part, it's just that moment of like painting my nails, showing it to my friend, and then like me just in that feeling, right? There's other contexts, like I wrote that during 2020 with the pandemic, and I was alone and stuff like that like exacerbates. But what I really wanted to focus on was like my uncertainty in how I felt about doing that, right? So there's always a bigger context that you can think about and tap into of like, okay, how do I like, what am I trying to communicate to another human being, right? Is it just that this crazy thing happened? Is it how I felt during it? Is it all of the stuff that led up to it? Like it on its own, like watching your this person dance is maybe mundane and not that important, and so you need all of that other stuff. So thinking about all of which is to say, thinking about what the story that you want to tell is, and then what best form can that take, right? I'm also someone who doesn't really believe in genre super like steadfastly, right? So I when I was like really, really young, I was like writing fiction, and I still write fiction occasionally, but I became a poet and then got into nonfiction and still do a lot of poetic whatever. In my prose work, I'm also like, I do a lot of research. I read like journalism. I do like a lot of technical writing too. So like all of this stuff is sort of about what emphasis is placed on a piece rather than something that's like, this is inherently a poem or this is inherently fiction, right? These things can get really blurred, if any of this makes sense. And then the last thing is just that, at least for my bit of this, my like rambling bit of this, is that like you have all of your own specific interests and obsessions and perspectives, and I'm someone who believes that like artists and writers, everybody, but people who are trying to tap into their sort of artistic spirit to communicate thoughts and ideas to other people, right, have an inherent sort of style that they know, like what sounds good, like what you like even if you have to be exposed to it first, right? You're like, that movie was really great, or like the way that this song plays out, or this line is really great. And so reading and writing and trying things and exploring, and I'm a big fan of those, like I tried writing like X author for a week videos, and it's like most of the time it's like it sucked and it wasn't worth the effort, and it's like that's fine. Like you try things, you explore, all with the purpose of tapping into your own like ideas and interests and questions, right? Style for me is really a matter of like what questions that you're asking constantly. Like, what are you seeing? What are you imagining? What do you want, right? Which is all to say, like, lean into that in the drafting, right? Like there will like you of course will have to rewrite it. Of course not everything's going to work. Of course even something that you're really proud of can with other eyes become better, right? Because you're going to be working with someone hopefully that like cares about you and your work, and there will be time to make it better later. But your role and your job in the drafting phase, right, is to honor yourself as much as possible, to like lean into the digressions and the formal stuff you want to do, and the weird metaphors that like maybe don't make sense to anyone else but you really love, and like lean into all of that, lean into the weirdness and the specificity. And then you can always cut back. It's always easier to write this expansive, weird, rambly thing and then carve something that really communicates what you're doing later, right? Out of that, versus to undercook something and then have to add to it, right? Really try to embrace and like take yourself as an artist seriously without necessarily being like self-serious, if that makes any sense. Yeah, and then sort of back to what I was saying earlier, like every moment is the culmination of every moment, right? So if you're thinking about narrative in terms of thing A happened and then thing B happened, so then when thing C happened, it had this weight, that's fine, and that gets to like pre-understood acceptable narratives and act structures and all of that. But also like I saw that person dancing and felt some type of way. That is the narrative, right? That is the story. Like your feelings, your emotions, your reactions are narrative. And so every moment is building up to it. So how do you want to depict that sort of intricate relationship, right? How do you want to express a feeling in a way that like makes the most sense in terms of what it was actually like? So so that's me. Those are some things that I think about a lot and that hopefully are interesting and make at least some degree of sense. I have the next, 10, 15, 20 minutes, reactions, asking for clarifications, questions. Again, I really like getting into the nitty gritty of editing and stuff, but I also think that these ideas are really important. So I don't know what everyone else is thinking, but I'll stop talking for at least a little bit.
Yeah, that was really cool. I really like both your pieces, and I love the bears. They were really funny to look at. Yeah, and I really like your example of the person dancing and the last point about just like being really specific and not caring about what the audience thinks sometimes, so you can just fully be yourself before needing to edit. So like when to what extent is it okay for the audience to not understand what you're saying but like know the feeling? Like how do you know, other than like asking other people to read your work, like how do you know when the specificity is too much, or like how to maintain the balance between what you communicate and like what you feel like is the most specific to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I know fully, but I think like you said, right? Like having people that you love and trust to read your work is obviously really important. Because the right person being like, this didn't land the way that you wanted it to, like I think we think of critique and editing as like a sort of harsh whatever, but it's like tenderness, it's like love, it's like I know what you're trying to say, or at least I think I do. Here's what I'm getting from it, like how can we make it better to like to together, right? How can my insight really help with that? I think another thing is that like I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I think it's also important to think about how you are as a reader, right? Because that's sort of the other flip side of writing, right? Of course, it's like you are creating work to be read, and then you are reading the work that other people have created, right? And so if you as a reader like need to Google something, or somebody uses a term from a different language that you have to look up, right? Does that like completely break or ruin your immersion, right? If I'm reading a poem and don't understand like every single line, but it sounds good and I get what I get from it, and I can do that work of being like, okay, I don't fully understand it, but like let me read it again, or let me, sort of spend time with it. Other people will do that for your stuff too. And so I think I don't know of any way beyond just like giving myself space, which is the other thing, like just like giving yourself a break, like finishing a draft of something and then letting it sit for weeks or months, and then coming back to and be like, oh yeah, I was like, that's dumb, or that's like not it, or I can change this and it makes it better, right? Or makes it clearer. But in terms of like giving yourself grace to like, not everybody has to understand everything, and that's beautiful too, right? I don't know if that answers the question, but I feel like that's something important to keep in mind too.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really nice.
What else are people thinking, feeling? Was that just totally
If we ever have like random time, we can also ask some of the questions people are wondering about in the Instagram sticker.
yeah. And also like anything, I mean, if this makes you think of something that's not like directly related, but you have a question or want to talk, I mean, I'm all for like a digressive conversation. So, but I mean, I can also just keep talking, which is maybe not it. And that asking really good question about pressure to put on certain personas, um, because of what you think will get published. Yeah, I mean, I think that pressure is like definitely, and especially if you are a writer of color, if you're queer, if you're from a certain countries or certain areas, right? There's like the narratives that people sort of assume about you or expect from you, and then there's your actual lived experience in life and all of that you have to sort of struggle with. I think, and I've gotten a lot better about this over time, but I think that there's also something about like I just can't think about publishing initially. And I think that that's also something that will be beneficial in the long run, in terms of like, I like to think about my work in terms of like projects, like a piece says something that is trying to do or say something specific. But very rarely am I like, I'm going to write something for this magazine, or I'm going to write to some theme that this magazine is like currently asking for. And that's because like trying to work with any of that in the moment, I find to me to be basically impossible. Like not only, which I guess requires sort of a larger divesting from like publication as like the measure of success, or like you're only a real writer if you've done X, Y, and Z, right? Because I I will be happy if I can write something that I'm happy with and I can give it to the people that I love and they like it too. Like if and like truly, like if my work never reaches beyond the like 12 pairs of eyes that I trust most, then that's fine, right? And I have to sort of work constantly, right? It's a process to prioritize that stuff, because that's stuff that I can control, and that I can work towards in a way that doesn't just like drive me crazy. and then everything, and then if you do that, if you focus on your own work, if you focus on your own skill, your own sort of questions, then at least in theory, a lot of the other stuff comes naturally. You can just like, oh, that magazine sounds cool. I have some poems in the bin or the backlog. I can send them, oh, one got picked up. That's really exciting. Then I can add that to my bio and then flip that to do more stuff, right? That process sort of comes naturally if you're, eventually gonna, send stuff out. But that the heart of it should be your own work and your friends and your loved ones and the people that you trust most, even if even if you haven't met them, right? I have a lot of conversations with authors in my head and with myself that I've never met, and be like, wow, what would so and so say if they read this? And of course it's like, well, they would like this, but they wouldn't like that. You're like, okay, I gotta like focus on myself, right? And on what I'm doing. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, it's hard, and I think it's especially hard because like as you're starting to publish something like or publish things, you like want to build more and more so that you look like you're more accomplished to other people, but ultimately in the long run that sort of stuff is secondary to the actual like skills that you're developing, sort of thinking about your work more in that way. I guess let me read these things.
Sarah, do you want to read them out loud just in case?
That's
Or
that's smart.
Should I read it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, or if anyone that asked them wants to unmute, that'd also be great.
Yeah,
If
down.
you'd like to read out your own questions, you can, or I can read them out for you if you'd like. I know that I think L. Lewis had a question. Would you like to read it out, or would you prefer if I read it?
Mhm.
Okay, I'll just read it. My question is a little backward to this. I misunderstood the name of the course. I signed up because I have to write a formal legal brief about critically deep and traumatic events without bringing any of that trauma into it. So I thought this would help me to dissect how to determine what is functionally important to outside voices on the page.
I would say that like, I mean, like, sorry, I probably could have named it better, and so I hope this has been interesting at the very least. I think obviously like what the formal legal brief is actually like doing, like is it to like paint a picture of something for like a defense of something, like what the specifics of that are. I think in that case, being really adherent to facts and to like this is literally what happened, like you don't have to like sensationalize it, but just be like, this is what happened. These are the effects that I or whoever am feeling about it. I think goes a long way, because depending on what the traumatic topic is, like um that a lot of that sort of speaks for itself, and sort of then you don't have to go into the full accounting of like it was on this day and this whatever and then this happened. Like you can more talk about it in generalities to help save space to then do what is important in terms of like what the brief is trying to do. But I guess I would need more information to kind of fully help. I'm sorry that this is not exactly what you were looking for.
I think they elaborated. They said, I have to write about litigation violence against us to an audience of family law lawyers who are bored by IPV.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not necessarily qualified to answer that. So again, I'm sorry. I would say that like um I think being able to, again, like say what happened, like as it actually happened, and not to shy away from like euphemisms or anything like that, just to describe the behavior. And in this case with intimate partner violence, like rely on like definitions of things, like this is what gaslighting is, this is what manipulation looks like, this is like being able to very much say like this is sort of A plus B equals C in those terms, I think would be really helpful. And some of that's like legal system, if you bring so that your trauma to it, will they or won't they sort of take it seriously, or what have you. I'm not super qualified, but I would say that like making sure that you can articulate just the facts of a case, and of the facts of a relationship, and to linger in that and in definitions, rather than sort of more creative or like lyrical whatever stuff, obviously would be helpful. Again, I'm sorry that I'm not super qualified.
Well, thank you for answering that question to the best of your ability. The next question we got was from Muhammad. They asked how to write about certain overused topics like heartbreak, relationships, etc., without sounding trite and rather sounding fresh and unique. How do you find the necessary words within you?
Yeah, I feel like it's it's not it's overused because it's like a lot of people experience a similar thing, right? But your specific version of it is not necessarily, right? I think the key is to find a way to approach it that isn't just, I've read for a lot of different magazines and read a lot of different essays that were submitted, and you read a lot of like, it's like dead grandparent essays about pets, and like breakup essays, and that's because it's not that those are subjects that are inferior or whatever, but it's that those are the most dramatic things that have happened in these people's lives. Like traveling stuff is also another one, because it fits into this sort of pre understood narrative, right? And so if you just write it as it happens, like we were together, then this happened and we broke up and I was sad, then that's like because you're embracing a um a narrative that sort of is widely understood, excuse me, versus like, what would it be like to write with like a breakup essay, right? What would it be like to write about just about the moment of like the month afterward, where you're like feeling horrible and you're like, haven't showered in a week and are wearing the same clothes, and like your vision is messed up. Like what does a moment of your life through that lens look like, right? That's a way to approach it that might be different, right? Some of this stuff, especially with like relationships, a lot of it like requires distance and empathy, right? So there is definitely a place for the you scorned me essay, but also thinking about like, okay, like what did I do? What was the situation? With some time, you might be able to write about. I mean, I just published an essay that I wrote a draft of like 3 years ago, and it was only now that I was able to come back to the idea and write it, because I had that distance, and write it in a way that was honest. So finding a unique angle, I think is key. And yeah, I mean that gets to the nitty gritty of your own story with that stuff, if that makes sense.
I think Muhammad elaborated and said, but like for example, when someone like Emily Dickinson writes about love, it's very different and very new, but I can't pinpoint what specifically makes it so.
Mm.
Would better vocab help?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, you should all be reading, right? You should all be writing a lot. You should all be reading a lot, reading diversely, right? Reading expansively. I think that, you know, something that, you know, everyone's gonna lose if they compare themselves to Dickinson, right? Like we're all like, you know, there are some people where it's just like you just can't touch them, right? And more importantly, not only is Emily Dickinson like amazing, but also her work is used as the standard, right? So when someone thinks about poetry, right, even like non-writers and especially non-writers, her work is something that comes up, right? Her work is the standard. So when we're thinking about how our work relates to the standard, that can get a little tricky because it's like, well, yeah, of course, Dickinson was this master who was able to do all of this different stuff. And then I am someone who is living in the shadow of that work. So how do I sort of approach it? And it feels very different and very new because she is very, you know, was very good at what she did, right? But it's also feels that way because we've been like raised to appreciate her work and like her stuff is part of the canon, right? So like, and not to take anything away from her stuff, but I think trying not to compare yourself, especially to like classic writers, is important because no one's ever going to get there, right? Which is what makes them so great. But you can try and you can, you know, write something and it doesn't feel great, and you can write something else and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, and sort of there's a process. In like individual pieces might not feel great, but if you sort of continue to write toward the same things, you sort of start to dig into that. I hope that helps.
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. The next question we got was, do you ever get was from Yin Lin, and they asked, do you ever get anxious about misinterpreting yourself when you slip into personas?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't know, like I'm always trying to walk that line of like I'm not lying to people. I want to be honest with them. I think something that poetry and essay has that fiction um in terms of like expectations has a harder time doing is weaving in the fact of the writing into itself. So like the fact that I'm writing this thing is part of the creation of it. So like I can talk about like I am anxious that I'm not telling the full story. Like I can make that part of it. But I think for the most part, I just embrace like, you know, do I ever represent myself? Right? Like I don't know if I ever do, right? I know like no one is ever going to see the real me because I can't even see the real me. And like people see things in me that I can't, right? So it's like, what even is that like that kind of assumes there's like a static you to represent wholly, right? Which I don't know if there is, or at least it's helpful for me not to think that there isn't, so that I can play with I can play and experiment with ways of representing myself on the page. And I think that also allows you to sort of like be really sincere but also sort of self-deprecate, or like be really sincere but also like underscore the fact that you're just like a person like everyone else trying to figure it out and like making mistakes. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's sort of what I was thinking when you asked that.
Awesome. So I think we got another question from Solly.
Yeah.
They asked, how do you know if you revealed too much about yourself, or should you reveal too much about yourself when writing? I often struggle with this in my work. Sorry if this question is confusing.
Not confusing at all. I feel like real talk, like I there are moments when I've known that I've done it because I've shared it with people who have not been kind with the information, and I've realized that I've made a mistake afterwards. Like I've like read stuff at readings where like three people in the audience are on the wavelength, but then everyone else is like, and obviously a lot of that comes down to lines of like race and gender and experience and background. Um I'm I'm somebody who's always, I think, more willing to get burned by that and then reel it back in than be too and that's just, I'm a Pisces. I talk a lot. Like I'm more like emotional and more like willing to share, and then sort of be like, oh, okay, I might have overshared or whatever. Even just in life, than kind of to do it the other way. Um, and so some of that is like trial and error. I think a lot of that is, again, good readers and good friends who will hold you and be like, I I love you and I respect what's happening. I don't know if you need all of this, or if sharing that is gonna make, like, using other people that you trust and care about as a guideline, I think is important. Also, I would not, lastly, I guess, I would also not worry, or I guess not worry. I would pay attention to those moments where something feels wrong. Like if you read something or write something and the idea of showing somebody this makes you uncomfortable, that's a real thing to like think about and like sit with and like consider. I think some of that can be like, oh, like you're not, you're scared to show your whatever work, or real criticism is harsh or whatever. But I think sitting with the reasons behind that. Is it just like you're anxious about it, or is it like this is not what I need to be sharing, right? That's a very real question, and obviously it's case by case, but I hope that's helpful. I talk too much, man. I got it.
I have a kind of a question, I'd say.
Yeah.
So if I've been told a lot, like, you shouldn't overwrite things, or like overwriting is bad. And I remember, like, in your presentation, you were kind of like, it's better to write too much and then have to cut out than write too little and then have to add. I just wanted kind of to know, like, is there ever a circumstance where you're just writing too much and writing yourself into a hole? And when do you know, like, when to stop writing and kind of go back?
Yeah, I have no clue. I guess I should say that, like, the it's always better to overwrite is what I've found about myself. I know people who, especially folks that do more like lyrical stuff, or more poetic stuff that's not as like I feel like my style is pretty dense, just in terms of like there's a lot of moving parts. And I like having a certain level of like verbosity, like word count. Um, and I have friends who are much more like sparse about writing, who can write something and it's like tissue paper. They're like, I can't manipulate this too much or else it just falls apart. And so they like just draft in like a different way. So if it works for you, I would do it, right? But I found that, like, because someone will point something out, like, I really want you to dive deeper into this idea because it's interesting, and I'm like, well, shit, now I have to fully like go back and reset and like write from a place that, like, it's just harder for me. I also write slowly is the other thing. Like, I like hopefully this might be comfortable to the comforting to some folks. I if I write like 300 words in like a writing session, like a day of writing, that's like average. Like I'm a really slow writer. I edit as I write. I'm really particular. I almost never write more than like 600 words if I'm really doing it. And I've just had to learn like that's just part of the process, right? That's just part of how I work. So my advice would just be to like lean into that. And if you feel like once you feel like you can't write anymore, like you've touched on everything that you want to in a piece, then you can kind of come up for air, give it some space and be like, okay, what do I actually need? Right. But having all of the options, I think is important. And it helps you learn that like words are like precious but not precious, right? You can always write more words and you can always change words. um yeah, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that is helpful. Thank you. Do you have like any more time for questions, or would you like to move on to like your next?
If people have more questions, I'm always down to talk. I think like it might also be good because I know we only have like however much time left. um if there are more questions, I'm happy to answer more questions. But if not, then I think giving us time to write and then talk about that or would be cool too.
Does anyone have any other questions, or are we ready to move on? Okay, I think we're good. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Let me guess I'll bring it back up. Bring back up the prompt. So maybe we'll do like maybe 15 minutes and then we can come back and talk about it. Um you know so yeah, telling a story from your real life, and again what you define as a story, a single moment, a whole narrative, whatever, in whatever form, but try to make it be the 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 version of you that's experiencing it on the page is heightened, fictionalized, somehow not exactly you, right? um and then if you don't want to share, I mean, if you do want to share once we're finished, that's fine too. But if you don't, then we can also talk about like process, how it felt, what choices you made without actually like reading the writing. I think that's valuable too, potentially. um yeah, I guess, are there any other questions, or I can do like a timer?
Yeah, I think you can do a that sounds good. You can do a timer.
Okay, I'll just do it on my phone and then I'll call it out when it's like 10 minutes, whatever. Timer. Yeah, okay, we'll do 15 minutes and then come back for like closing thoughts. Okay. Begin. Air horn noises. Use this time to run off really quickly. Got a little less than 10 minutes left. Think about. Obviously, stuff doesn't have to be finished. So got about 5 minutes left, and then we'll reconvene. And yeah, do wrap up thoughts, all that stuff. Got about a minute left. Yeah, I mean, I'm just chilling out. So if anyone wants to, obviously, if you have to go, go. If there's anyone left, but yeah, hang out. 19 seconds. Will go off. That's the little. Yeah, cool. Yeah, again, I don't know how you want to spend the last little bit of time. But again, hopefully all this was interesting and help people think about some stuff. People want to share, talk about it.
Yeah, this was really interesting. I think a lot of people were saying like this is really great in the chat. There's a lot of chat messages from lots of people.
Yeah.
So I wrote about a door eating my fingernail,
Mm,
or like I was in first grade and I was playing hide and seek with my cousin and her friend and her neighbor, and we were like there was like this door and it was really weird. Like it had like the hinges were like spikes, like they kind of look like teeth. So I was like, oh, so they, and so my fingernail, my thumbnail was like behind the door, like in the spikes, because I was leaning against it. And my cousin was trying to like catch the neighbor on the other side. And then, oh no, never mind. The neighbor was, I wrote this wrong. The neighbor was trying to catch us, and Maya was like, my cousin was like trying to close the door so that she couldn't get us, and my finger was behind it, and she shut the door, and the spike like made a like completely just like pulled off, ripped off my fingernail. So yeah, that's what I wrote about. I tried to like portray the door as a lot scarier than it was, because it was just a door.
yeah.
I didn't really think much of the door, but it was like it was a strange door. I don't know why it looked like that and why it had like a bunch of spikes down the side, but yeah, that's how my fingernail fell off. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think another like great example of this is like writing about yourself as a kid or like past selves. It's like
Yeah.
you saw the world differently, you believed totally different things, and so like filtering it that way, it's like it's not how I think now, and it's obviously like a construction, but yeah, no, that's great.
Does
Anyone
anyone
else
else have
want to?
like, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, just yeah. Does anyone else want to share what they wrote or talk about it or?
Yeah, I didn't.
Oh no, Emma, go ahead. We'll do
Yeah, we'll
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
do it.
Okay. Um, I mean, it's okay. They can go first. It's okay.
No, Emma, seriously. They said technically you started talking first, so you're fine.
Okay. I didn't really write anything new, but this reminded me of something I wrote like a month ago, and it was only like 200 words. So I looked at it again and I like made some small edits. And it's kind of about me missing someone, but it's like about peppers. Um, I was kind of I didn't really yeah, if I read it maybe it'll make sense.
Yeah.
But like yeah, if you guys are good with that, because it's I think it's like 270 like words or something.
Sure, we got it. We got time.
Okay. Should I share screen or should I just read it?
You can do whatever you like,
Okay.
whatever you think enhances the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
experience.
this is like the strangest thing I've written in a bit, so I was like, this probably works. It's called Peppers. Um, Okay, I guess I can share screen. Peppers. I want to nail your eye to the Eiffel Tower so God will have something bizarre to look at, make pasta primavera on Staten Island on a Tuesday, fall asleep listening to cold weather, Rio P Tree of Light, and not think about peppers. So many kinds of peppers. The green ones too sweet and rubbery, like detergent commercials, and dried chili flakes and sizzling oil, discoing a moon long in the sky, big enough to sleep in, but not enough to feel it burn. There's already too many ways to burn. Maybe people aren't even special. We just chop one lifetime to too many pieces. I delete key smashes from your contact and think illogically that chaos is the only antidote to time, the only irreplaceable cliff of escalating entropy to the hope that quarks one day decide to unsaute themselves into black holes and radiate forever, ribboning through space-times, those crescent serranos carving every 22nd word of every 22nd person, every 22nd night they can't see the moon, into dust smaller than matter, into ice. Maybe chaos is what makes us remember. Maybe I still miss you. When I asked what life you wanted to live in 30 years, I started crying before I heard the answer. You know, like America, Columbus discovered the chili pepper. We had a debate in A-Push where someone said Columbus wanted to be filthy rich so he can. God, you said he just wanted to be proud of himself. The seeds so ripe they are holy. I think your eye was made to be a planet. In my kitchen and not France, I become Eve. I rebirth ghost peppers after ghost pepper until everything waters. It tastes like the world's still open. So that was like I like one of the pieces I kind of had no idea what I was doing with when I started writing it, but I think I just like wanted a strange way to talk about my emotions, and I don't really know if you guys have any thoughts or anything that I could incorporate.
Wow. I mean, that was like incredible. But also I really like I don't know, it's just like the way you weaved peppers through the whole thing was insane. And I just I would totally need to reread it to like get like I need to like I definitely need to see that again. You should send it to like the Slack or something. But I definitely want to see that again. It's so amazing. And I also I really like that one line about like you deleting keyboard smashes from the contact. That is so real.
I
Like
had
I've
like
totally done
I
that.
had such a conversation with my friend about it because I was like, I feel like people are so much less special once I delete the chaos from their contacts, or like once I kind of just like I don't know. It's like I feel like people like start off neutral and then they become chaos, and then once you remove the chaos, they're just neutral again. So
Oh, yeah, that's really relatable. I recently did that. I deleted someone's like whole like all this stuff from their contact, and I just made their name like their first and
yeah,
last, and I was like, oh my God. I
yeah,
was and like remove their profile picture, like unpinned, put like I was like, I'm done. It's done. It's over. So, not that we weren't dating, but it was like a friendship that ended, and I like completely just like removed everything. It's so sad too. Yeah.
yeah.
No, that was great. And this is something that I also see in Saoirse's piece, not to jump ahead too much, but you had that line as a sweet and rubbery like a detergent commercial. Like that is like there's something about like something that is sort of on its face kind of strange or like takes you a second to sort of process, but it's like that's just interesting, right? I just want to like think about that comparison. I don't know if Saoirse, if you want to read this or if we can just sort of read it in our heads. But yeah, I was also blown away by like yeah, like the specificity and the like nitty-gritty of a lot of these images and ideas and the movement. Y'all both killed it.
Okay, I think that means Saoirse. Does Saoirse? Yeah, we can read in our heads. Yeah.
Of course, of course. One of my friends from elementary school was named Saoirse, and pronouncing things is important to me, clearly. Excuse me, I don't know if anyone's finished or whatever, but I would just personally like to highlight I drank the silent fireworks, excuse me, as a really great line. And the whole sentence that starts with, I can't say I sprouted wings. That's like the motion of that sentence is absolutely crazy. Yeah, it's really, really incredible.
Yeah, that sentence is insane. Oh my God, I love it so much. The ashes of a dying home.
Also, not to get like super specific, but the last comma after there in the last sentence is doing so much work that it's like that's wild. That's a like that's a very there's a lot there in a good way, obviously. Does anyone else want to share or have any questions? Or I guess we're kind of at time, but
Yeah, if you're fine, I just wanted to say like
yeah.
the last line, I really like it. It connects to like what I was thinking. As soon as I saw the prompt, I thought like exaggerated. So if I were to live like a past experiences as I am right now, I would definitely be a lot different than the past. So like I didn't necessarily have to think outside of like the real world in like a fictional world. I just had to like think of something that changed a lot from the past to now inside of me and just take that experience and write about it. And it's crazy to see like how much you changed. And for me, that was kind of like sports when I was in fifth grade to now, like a lot changed. So I was really happy. And like that prompt was really interesting because we don't really write things like that a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad you found it interesting. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Just like thinking back to me in grade school or middle school, it's like, yeah, I'm not only am I a totally different person, but like I would have a different relationship with all of the stuff that I experienced. So yeah, it doesn't even have to be like exaggerated. Yeah, like you're saying, like a fictional way. It can just be like displaced feelings and emotions that sort of highlight, yeah, that this is all sort of constructed. It's all delivered to mean something, right? So yeah, no, that's a great point.
Well, thank you so much for coming today. We had a great time. This is kind of like a lot different from our normal meetings. So yeah, it's good to have something different once in a while.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for having me. I was like, I was nervous, I'll be honest, about like, I don't know if this is too out there, but I'm glad that people enjoyed it, and hopefully I've, y'all wrote incredible stuff, and hopefully there are some ideas that you will think about and turn over, and thinking thoughts in the brain is always important. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gyasi. We learned so much from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you guys should submit to our next issue. Like the writing here is like absolutely insane. And I just, yeah, thank you guys so much for everything. This was really, really, really fun. So yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys. So if there's nothing else, I think we'll close off. If Gyasi, do you have any like last things to say?
No, just like, yeah, keep writing, stay curious. You guys are I guess I always say this to like younger people, but like y'all are like 100% legitimately like much better writers than I was at y'all's age, and that's like of a very real like the game has been upped, and if I can find a modicum of success with this stuff, then y'all certainly can. So yeah, keep writing and keep thinking about stuff. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. So I think we're gonna close off now. Everyone's just saying thank you in the chat and that this has been a really insightful workshop. So thank you, Gyasi, and we'll definitely keep you guys updated on any future workshops that we have. But this was a really, really great workshop. So we can't thank you enough, Gyasi. And so I think we're gonna go now. It's 11:30. This was really great. So should we like
Yeah,
close
and
it
thank
off?
you, Zara, for everything. Like you literally made this event possible. So it's
Thank
all you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So bye guys. Thank you.
Bye.